Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if neglected Naruto became Konoha's Dark Doctor? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now start the fanfic. Had been 6 years since the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. The third Hokage had sacrificed his life to seal the Kyuubi into his twin sister, Shio Uzumaki. Many would believe that his life would be better with a life without being an orphan, without the Kyuubi, and without the hatred of the village. They would think wrong. Naruto Uzumaki had spent 6 years of his life being neglected and slowly being forgotten by his parents. It used to be small things, such as forgetting to call him for dinner, ignoring his suggestions when going out, and never tucking him into bed at night. Eventually, however, the neglect had gotten worse. His parents began to forget him more and more and eventually even forgot his birthday. The people in the village seemed to forget he was even the son of their Hokage and ignore him like any other faceless orphan child of the village. After his forgotten 5th birthday he began to truly raise himself. He cooked his own meals at odd hours to not interact with his family and started to read books on ninja basics. He studied the basics relentlessly to prepare for the academy at age 8. He knew he couldn't count on his parents for training. If he couldn't trust them to remember his birthday, how could he trust them to train him? He knew that they had already started training Shio at age 5. When he asked them to help him train, they simply glanced at him and told him he would be trained at the academy and Shio needed extra help to control the Kyuubi. It was at that point he lost all faith in his parents and he started to not even call them that in his head. He eventually started to leave the estate and train on his own. He soon learned he had a knack for chakra control as he mastered the basic leaf sticking exercise on his 4th try. He eventually got so good at the exercise he could stick more than 10 leaves to his body at a time. However, he knew he would need more instruction than just basic scrolls. He soon started sneaking into Minato's library and stole numerous scrolls on the basics. As he completed more of the chakra control exercises, he learned that unlike his mother and sister, he did not have too much chakra. He still had an above-average level for his age, as expected of any Uzumaki, but not enough for it to be unmanageable. He was reading a specific exercise called tree walking. There were no trees large enough in the estate to really learn the exercise, so he exited the gate and went to the surrounding forest of the Uzumaki estate. He packed a backpack full of items that he would need, a change of clothes, some food, some kunai, shuriken, a bedroll, and some jutsu scrolls from Minato's private library. He was planning on sleeping outside tonight and get away from the estate. It's not like they would remember him anyway. He reached his usual training clearing and prepared to get to work. He had stolen some useful jutsu from Minato. He had stolen the instructions for Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, Water Walking, Tree Walking, Kawamari no Jutsu, Henge no Jutsu, Bushin no Jutsu, and a stolen Suna scroll on how to create chakra strings. He had also managed to find some of Tsunade's training scrolls on medical jutsu. He assumed that it was a gift to Minato that he never used. He knew that some of the jutsu were beyond him at the moment. He barely had enough chakra to create 1 Kage Bushin. But he figured out with just 1 Kage Bushin he could train twice as fast and increase his reserves at the same time. He already knew what he wants to focus on in his ninja career. Whatever Minato and Kushina were bad at he would specialize in. He knows that Minato and Kushina are really bad at medical arts, genjutsu, and poisons. He only wished that Tsunade hadn't left the village after she healed Kushina from the extraction of the Kyuubi. Though he was doubtful that Tsunade would want to teach him, most likely she would just focus on Shio like Jiraiya and Kakashi. He quickly got to work on tree climbing. He knows that theoretically if he masters tree climbing he can master any jutsu, or at least that's what it says in the description. After several tries he found that tree climbing was not that hard. He did not know if it was because of the level of difficulty of the exercise or if he just had good control of his chakra. He trained with tree walking for several hours, slowly being able to walk up the tree without much focus. After his 50th repetition of the exercise, he was quite exhausted. He knew it was thanks to his inherited Uzumaki stamina that he had managed to last for so long. As he drank some water, he decided to visit the library, a place of solace for him when the neglect gets too much. He wanted to read some medical textbooks to try and get an early start on his medical education. He wanted to at least be able to patch up basic wounds by the time he enters the academy. He enters the library and smiles at the old librarian. The librarian, Yui Haruka, is a retired chunin of the village, with graying brownish hair, large thick glasses. She looked like every other common grandmother. She had been a friend of Naruto since he had started coming here at age 5. She was one of the only villagers who actually pays attention to him. He walked silently to the medical section. Many of the more advanced books were safely stored at the hospital, however there were many books that explained basic medical practices left in the library for aspiring students. The library also had a wide selection of anatomy, botany, biology, and science textbooks for civilian students. Naruto proved his prodigious intellect as he understood the medical texts. After recovering enough chakra, he had already made a kage bushin and had read a book on the human anatomy while he read the basics of medical chakra. The book described medical chakra as purified spiritual energy. This purified spiritual energy enters the dead or dying cells of the target and reactivates them, quickly healing the target. However, one must have great chakra control and mental focus to use these techniques because an overflux of medical chakra could kill the cells instead of healing them. The book mentioned some famous applications of healing chakra, such as Tsunade's legendary strength by separating her chakra into spiritual and physical energy. He decided that one of his goals would be to eventually recreate Tsunade's strength. He looked out the window and sat that it was getting rather late. The library would be closing soon. He released his clone and closed his eyes to absorb the information from his doppelganger. It appeared that the clone discovered all of the pressure points of the body, the 7 critical spots of the body, and what the chakra system looks like in the human body. It was quite fascinating. He returned to his spot in the woods and after eating a light meal of bread and cheese, went to sleep. The next day, 6 a.m. village forest. Naruto woke up to see it was very dark and cloudy today. It was probably going to rain. He quickly packed all of his belongings in his pack and quickly ran back to the estate, hoping to miss the rain. As he was about to open the gate, he noticed something wrong right when he tried to open it. It would not open. Growing slightly desperate, he tugged harder on the gate. It remained firmly closed. He tried to think of why the gate wouldn't open and his eyes widened. Today was October 1st. Minato always redrew the seals on the estate by the end of each month. One of the seals identified who was allowed into the estate by their chakra signature. Minato must have forgotten to input him into the defenses. He knew that Minato would already be in his office, and that Kushina would be making breakfast for Shio soon. He stood there for a few minutes silently as it started to rain. He looked up at the sky and saw it was starting to pour, drenching him. He knew he was finally fully forgotten by the Namikaze family. He wondered why this information hurt him as much as it did. He knew this day would occur eventually. Ever since his 5th birthday, he had been preparing for the day his parents abandoned him. He had stocked enough non-perishable food at a cave near the glade he trains in to last him at least 2 years. As he stood there in the rain, his anger and hatred grew for the family. He would not beg or yell at that man to let him back into the house. He didn't care that he had no resources or backing from any family anymore. He decided to get revenge on his former family. He knew that this goal would be nearly impossible. The Namikaze Uzumaki family was loved throughout the land of fire. Minato was loved by the daimyo and would never hear a bad word against him. He also knew that when Shio entered the academy, no one would say anything bad to her. However, he didn't care. He would gain revenge in any way he could. The only possible method to do so in his eyes was to be better than Shio. If he was better than Shio, he could prove to everyone in the village he didn't deserve to be forgotten. That he was just as important than the princess of Konoha. He started to walk back to the forest knowing he had to find shelter from the rain. He knew of a cave near the glade he was in that he can take shelter in. After the rain passes he could figure out what to do. Hidden Cave 7 a.m. As he rested inside the cave he used some chakra control exercises to dry his clothes and body from the rain. He had rarely entered this cave, never finding much need to. The cave was the perfect hideout. The natural formation of the trees and shrubbery effectively hid the entrance while a rock formation around the cave hid it from view even further. But now it was his home for the foreseeable future and he decided to explore it. As he walked down the cave he noticed that the floor was gradually getting smoother and the walls more box shape as he slowly walked deeper into the cave. Eventually he arrived at a steel door, slightly rusted with age. He tried to open the door but it was locked. He used a trick he discovered from breaking into Minato's library so often. He formed a small chakra string and inserted it into the lock. He started to pump chakra into the string and it expanded into the shape of the key. Slowly turning it he heard a click and the door opened inward. The room inside looked like an abandoned laboratory, filled with jars of animal parts, preserved plants, and many other unknown objects. He looked around a bit more and found a desk next to a distilling station with a journal resting on it. He started to read some of the first pages. January 5th. I recently found a cave that will be perfect for my poison and medical studies. Here I will be able to start my path to power. The snake Sanin, Orochimaru. January 10th. I have begun testing on small animals my snakes have brought to me. Many of my poisons are still too messy. I have begun to experiment with different venoms and plants to create the perfect poison. February 2nd. I have done it. I have made the perfect poison. After several minutes of applying the poison it remains completely undetectable for several hours before the animals die of a heart attack. I cannot be sure if the result will have the same effects on humans. I do not wish to be discovered by bringing local bandits to this laboratory. Perhaps some of the children of the civilians of the village can assist me in my projects. Naruto nearly dropped the journal in shock. He had found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories. He knew who the snake Sanin was through Minato's library. He had read about the monstrosities this man had committed against the citizens of Konoha. However, as he stared at the journal he knew this could be the key in giving him an edge over Shio. He knows that Shio will be getting tutoring from at least 4 cage-level ninjas. By the time Shio graduates she will probably be high Chunin level, even more so if she proves to be a prodigy like her father. He knows to be better than her he would need a serious edge. An edge that could be gained from this laboratory. But could he lower himself to accept tutoring, even indirectly, from one of the most monstrous missing nin in the elemental nations? He looked at more of the passages in the journal, all describing horrific experiments and poisons that could kill anyone. He contemplated on how far he would be willing to go for his revenge. He looked around the lab seeing all of the tools available to him if he accepted this dark path. He started remember all of the times his family had forgotten him. He remembered when his family went to the Kyubi festival forgetting him at the house. He remembered watching his family eating dinner, all laughing together as a family. He remembered watching from his window as Minato and Kushina began Shio's training, forgetting him entirely. He finally remembered him standing out in the rain, completely forgotten and abandoned. Naruto looked around the lab once more, seeing instructions for high-level poison making, high-level medical techniques, chemistry sets, gas masks, syringes, and then looked to the far wall where 3 practice dummies were kept and imagined the faces of his family on them, never looking at him and treating him like a stranger, and he felt his hatred grow further. He looked at the journal in his hand and accepted the fact that he was going to walk down this dark path. He walked to the door and closed it, locking it from the inside. And when he exited the laboratory, he would be a changed person. Naruto was obsessed. He had learned much in the 5 months he had begun studying in the laboratory. He had learned almost all of the basic poisons from the ingredients he was able to locate from the surrounding forest. He had relentless LT worked on his chakra control with the tree walking and water walking exercises. He now was able to summon 3 shadow clones to train alongside of him. One shadow clone would work on chakra control while the other 2 continued their medical and poison studies. He had finished reading Orochimaru's journal. He was absolutely disgusted by some of the experiments conducted by Orochimaru. Apparently he would experiment on humans and catalog their reactions to his poisons. He learned to prevent queasiness after the first chapter. However, he kept telling himself that he needs to continue this path to continue his dream of revenge. After the first few months of studying Orochimaru's poisons, he was almost glad that Orochimaru had finished his experiments before he was forced out of Konoha. His effort is his benefit. His poisons seemed to have more uses than just killing. He seemed to divide his poisons into 3 categories: fatal, non-fatal, and other use. His fatal poisons were among the most numerous, ranging from poisons that would kill you upon injection to poisons that could remain docile for days before killing the target. His non-fatal poisons were very wide-ranged. The effects ranged from sleeping drafts to bottled madness, think the berserker poison from AC. Some of the poisons even did the reverse of poisons and seemed to heal the drinker. He wondered if those poisons would be better classified as elixirs. The section that really interested him was the other effects. The section seemed to be dedicated to enhancing the body through poisoning oneself. However, some of the poisons had strong side effects. One even turned the body into a mummified husk after the effects wore off. He decided to not try any of these poisons until he had a much stronger body, mind, and much more chakra control. The journal mentioned that if one constantly poisoned oneself with minor venoms, it could help negate poisoning oneself. His indirect sensei wrote that it would help build up the immune system. He soon found, however, that most minor poisons had almost no effect on him. He assumed this was due to being a half Uzumaki. Abusing this genetic trait, he constantly poisoned himself with minor to medium level poisons, gradually increasing his resistance to different venoms. He had also found several books on sealing in the laboratory. He contemplated learning the art a long time, since it was Minato's specialty. However, as he reviewed some of Orochimaru's greatest works, he realized he would need a good foundation in sealing to accomplish them, such as the legendary curse seals that were briefly mentioned in the journal. Before he knew it, 5 months had already gone by in the laboratory. He had mastered most of the basics of being a ninja. His chakra control was high genin level. His medical skills were enough to be able to patch up most minor wounds. He had learned to create many of the basic to medium poisons listed in the several texts that Orochimaru left behind. However, he knows that the basics were not enough and that he needed to learn more advanced techniques to defeat his sister. Namikaze Uzumaki Estate, Konoha, 5 months after Naruto left, Shio POV. Shio had learned much from her 4 tutors. She was already starting the basics of Kenjutsu, chakra control, hand seals, and sealing. Despite all of the positive attention from the villagers and her parents, she was not spoiled. Her Ka-san would murder her if she acted like a spoiled clan heiress. However, she still acted arrogant around other children. She deserved to act arrogant because she was better than them. Her two-san had introduced her to a new chakra control exercise yesterday, the tree walking exercise. She was having a lot of difficulty completing it. Her two-san always told her that it was because of her large chakra reserves. But she had already gotten halfway up the tree. She bet no one has been able to complete this exercise faster. She knows she will be super strong by the time she is ready for the academy. She would beat down all of the other students and make her way to becoming Hokage. Datbeo. Forest of Death. Konoha, 1 year and 5 months after the start of training, Naruto POV. It had been 1 year since Naruto had mastered the basics. He had grown a little and was now age 7.5. He had changed greatly over the year. Due to lack of sleep and from being around so many poisons, his eyes had lost their pupils. I have no idea if this is possible, but so many Naruto characters don't have pupils, so I assume that is the cause, and his hair had gone from a sunny blonde to an almost white color. Due to careful combing, his hair had gradually lost its signature spikiness and he had grown his hair in two long bangs on the side of his face with a short ponytail. He was now wearing a hooded fur-lined coat, black shinobi pants, black medical wrap around his arms, and dark green shinobi sandals. He carried a satchel lined with storage seals to carry all of his supplies. It's a satchel, not a purse. He also wore a gas mask loose around his neck, almost acting as a face mask as it covered half his face. Thanks to injecting himself with so many poisons, his blood was very toxic. He had discovered this when he had accidentally cut himself and it fell on a rat he was experimenting with. The rat had suddenly started to convulse until it died several minutes later. He had also discovered that due to the toxins in his blood, it was now a pure black color. He had created a new identity in the village. He put himself down as an orphan named Menma. He had also signed up for the academy. He had contemplated just leaving the village, but he had nowhere else to go. Iwa would rather kill him than let him join their village. Kumo would put him into a breeding program. Suna was allied with the Leaf. And he didn't even want to think about Kiri with their civil war going on. Besides, how could he gain his revenge against the Namikaze family if he was in a different village? In the present, however, he was searching for rare plants that were required for his latest poison in the Forest of Death. The Forest of Death was named this for a reason. However, due to the toxin in his blood, most predators left him alone because they could smell he was dangerous and inedible. As he continued to walk into a clearing full of nightshade, a beautiful purple plant that looks like lavender, just 10 times more deadly, he jumped back as a kunai flew past him into the ground. He drew a scalpel and injected a little medical chakra into it to allow it to cut easier. As he was preparing for a fight, he heard a female voice laugh mockingly, hehehehe. Does the Ickle Gaki want to play with me? The little Gaki is not supposed to be here. Naruto looked around cautiously, trying to pinpoint the voice, and spoke in his usual monotone voice. Who are you? The gate was open when I arrived at this forest, so I assumed it was allowed. It was true, the side gate to the forest was wide open when he was trying to break into the forest. From her hiding spot in the trees, Anko Mitarashi sweat dropped as she had forgotten to lock the gate before she had entered the forest. But she wasn't going to let any Gaki talk back to her. She quickly shushined right behind the Gaki and pointed a kunai at his cheek, going for full creepiness factor 10. She spoke seductively, menacingly in his ear and said, well Gaki, my name is Mitarashi Anko and you better remember it. Now why don't you tell me who you are and why you are in this forest when it is usually restricted to Chunins and Jonins? Naruto's eyes widen a bit. Mitarashi Anko is the name of Orochimaru's apprentice in the village. If he played his cards right, this could go very good or very bad. He decided to be at least partially truthful. My name is Menma, and I am searching for rare plants to continue my studies. Anko deadpans at the 7-year-old and goes to creepiness factor 11 and uses her favorite jutsu to summon a snake to scare the kid and chuckled. You're telling me that some brat like you goes into the Forest of Death to find some plants for a science project? Naruto's eyes narrow a bit and started to explain what he was looking for. I'm searching for some nightshade to mix with the venom of the poisonous tree leaves often found in this forest. Anko whistled at the potency of that venom and commented, and what would a Gaki like you want with a poison that could kill a grown man in a few seconds? He smiled slightly and said, it's for my fighting style. I am training myself in poisons and medical jutsu. Anko's eyes widened a bit at that information. He was teaching himself poisons and medical jutsu. Those two fields were some of the most underestimated fields of being a ninja. Most people just liked flashy ninjutsu or fancy taijutsu. Her eyes gleamed a bit as she looked at the young prodigy. Her creepiness factor was increasing to level 12 as she licked her lips as she stared at Naruto like a predator. He was starting to get a bit nervous as he looked at the gleam in Anko's eyes. He had heard her reputation around the village for being a bit crazy. He started backing away slowly and smiled nervously. Well, I'll go. As he started to walk away, he felt a hand clamp down on his head and he gulped nervously. Standing behind him is a shadowed Anko giggling creepily. He, well, Gaki, if you want to be a poison user, you can't find a better sensei than me. What most people did not realize about Anko is that she always wanted a student to teach her arts to. She wanted to give a student the chance to succeed that Orochimaru stole from her when he abandoned her with the curse mark. So prepare yourself, Gaki, you will be under the supervision of the great and Mitarashi Anko until you graduate from the academy. She dragged him back into the forest laughing the entire way. Naruto's only thought about the situation was, how did getting caught in the forest of death lead to this? The academy, Konoha, initiation ceremony for all new and returning students. Training with Anko sensei was a torture, interesting experience. He had thought he had trained hard before, but Anko's training took the cake. She played games in the form of training with him. Outrun the giant snake before it eats you, identify the hidden poison in all of your food, dodge the kunai, and her personal favorite of hide and don't get caught or you will be stabbed. He can't argue with the results though. His situational awareness level had increased exponentially. He could now be aware of his situation at all times even if he was asleep. In addition, Anko helped him with his toxic blood problem. She had told him it was a side effect of trying to build up one's immune system too fast. She taught him a jutsu that would detoxify his blood when not in battle, and would increase its potency during battle. She also taught him the hubby style of combat which went excellently with his chakra scalpels and poisons. The hubby style was similar to the Hyuga's gentle fist except that instead of injecting chakra to one's opponent the user injects poison through the user's attacks. The style also taught him to be extremely flexible to get into one's guard. Despite the harsh training they eventually became good friends. Near the end of their training he told Anko his true heritage. First flashback. It was the final day of training and they were both relaxing in one of the large branches in the Forest of Death. Anko had brought some sake and dango for them to share, one stick of dango for Naruto and the rest for Anko. Naruto was contemplating whether or not to tell Anko his heritage. She had earned his broken trust during their training and he felt slightly guilty for lying to her. He sighed and began to explain to Anko, "Hey Anko, I wanted to tell you before our training ends that I haven't been exactly truthful. I am actually the forgotten son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki." Anko looked at Menma, his fake name, and laughed. "Ha ha ha, yeah, good one, Gaki." She laughed for a bit until she saw his serious face and frowned. "Wait, you're serious?" Naruto nodded and started to tell her his life story, of being forgotten by his parents, finding the laboratory, he did not say who last owned it, to the present. She was stunned at first and became thoughtful for a second. "I just don't get it. I've seen the Hokage's family and they act like the perfect family. I am a master of psychology and even I know that parents don't just abandon one kid over the other for a small thing like training one sibling." Menma frowned. He did read some psychology books and his parents did not behave as normal parents would. He pushed those thoughts to the sides and focused back on his ideas of revenge and commented bitterly, "I guess they are the exception and they just didn't want a son." Anko patted Menma's shoulder comfortingly and commented, "Well, it seems we both had sucky childhoods then. Well, our training is at an end for now, the academy is starting soon. I know you don't need it but good luck, Gaki." She poofed away in a shushin, taking the remaining dango with her. The opening ceremony for the academy is an honored tradition amongst the shinobi and civilian families. It was a time to meet the teachers, scout potential talent, and hear the Hokage's speech. The adults usually congregated around the teachers, asking questions and reviewing the curriculum for their children. The older students would congregate in their already made groups while the younger ones met new people and formed new friendships. Menma looked around the festivities, feeling slightly bored. He was not here to make friends or mingle with other students. If coming to the ceremony wasn't mandatory for all new students he wouldn't have bothered to come. Soon 10 a.m. was approaching and everyone took their seats to hear the Hokage talk. Menma glared at Minato as he took the stage. He barely looked different in the 2 years since he last saw him. As Minato rambled on with his speech of the will of fire and protecting the village, he looked around at the rest of his classmates. It appeared as if at least one of each major clan was attending. He even saw the elusive Kurama clan heiress among the people attending. He had heard of the girl. Apparently she had awakened a special bloodline that turned her illusions real, at the cost of creating a separate personality. Though thanks to the quick actions of Kushina and Minato, the alternate personality was sealed and she could become a shinobi. He sighed as Minato's speech ended and they all were called in for the first day of the academy. As they took their seats, the teacher started rambling on about the will of fire and the grand history of Konoha. He sighed. This was going to be a long 4 years. Academy. Konoha, 4 years after Menma started the academy. It had been 4 long years since Menma had started the academy. It had proved to be a wonderful waste of time for the majority of the day. However, he didn't complain. He knows that the academy was necessary to join the ninja ranks. He had not changed his outfit much in the last 4 years. He now wore a tan-colored trench coat, a gift from Anko, his gas mask on his neck, a black muscle shirt and Anbu-style pants along with regular shinobi sandals. He was the rookie of the year for all 4 years, much to the chagrin to all of the clan children. People were sometimes comparing him to Minato, who was an orphaned rookie of the year as well. He had not shown all of his abilities during the academy, instead demonstrated himself as a rising prodigy as a med nin and poison specialist. He had revealed Anko's training as a way to cover up the skills he did demonstrate. Right behind his spot is Neji Hyuga, a boy who kept telling him that his success is fate and that he was destined to be Rookie of the Year. Yeah, he didn't make friends with Neji. However, he surprisingly did make a few friends during his time at the academy. He had made friends with Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kurama was the Kunoichi of the year and Rock Lee was the dead last. He had already figured out that these were to be his future teammates by reviewing the previous graduating classes. Every year the Rookie of the Year and the Kunoichi of the Year team up with the dead last. He supposed they balanced each other out, a taijutsu specialist, a genjutsu specialist, and a medical poison expert. What he did not know is that in the Hokage's office they were having a meeting about the teams right now. Hokage's office, Minato's POV. All of the potential Jonin senseis were in the room along with the Hokage and academy teachers as they reviewed the graduates of the year. Minato cleared his throat and began the meeting. We have 30 potential graduates this year. I am glad the academy curriculum has managed to produce so many potential ninjas. The academy professors glowed with pride that they were able to teach the next generation. Now let's start with Team 1. They discussed the teams briefly and matched personalities until they arrived at Team 9 inches. Now we have the team of the Rookie of the Year, the Kunoichi of the Year and the dead last. The teachers nodded and Aruka Yumino stepped forward with the bios and information from the 3 students. First, the dead last. Rock Lee is a very dedicated student but has no ability to wield chakra to produce major ninjutsu or genjutsu. He is able to do the basic 3 academy jutsu and reinforce his body with chakra, but that's about all he can do. However, he is a very dedicated student and a budding taijutsu master under the tutelage of Maeda Guy, who has been training the boy since the 2nd year of the academy. He turned the page on his folder. The Kunoichi of the Year, Yakumo Kurama, is a prodigy in genjutsu almost on the level of the missing nin Itachi Uchiha. She is rather weak in taijutsu but is excellent in ranged weaponry, especially when combined with her illusions. He flipped to the final page, and finally the Rookie of the Year Menma, an orphan but has proved to be a prodigy in poisons and medical ability. He has worked part-time at the hospital during his academy years and the only thing preventing him from being an active medic is his age and lack of chunin status. He is also incredibly skilled in taijutsu with Anko-san's fighting style. He has told me he has had private training with Anko in the past. Everyone shivered at that information except the Kunoichi in question. Poor kid. Uruka put down the folder at the Hokage's desk and Minato perused the information on the three students. He found Menma interesting. As an orphan himself, he knew how hard it was to make it to Rookie of the Year without any help. However, it seems like he had a similar relationship with Anko as he had with Jiraiya. He looked up as the team senseis ended their discussion on who would be best as their sensei. Anko stepped forward along with Guy and Anko spoke seriously. I would like to be sensei of this team. They would make an excellent assassination and escort team with Menma's poison skills, Lee's taijutsu skills, and Yakumo's genjutsu abilities. She stepped back a bit and Guy started to speak. I would like to be allowed to continue to tutor Rock Lee privately in taijutsu. I do not question Anko's ability to teach him, but he already has a firm foundation in the strong fist fighting style. Minato processed this information. It was a good idea. Anko already had experience with Menma while the other two could benefit from Anko as well. Rock Lee would not be neglected due to Guy's insistence on training him. He nodded and pressed his seal of approval on the team. Accepted. Team 9 will be composed of Menma, Rock Lee, and Yakumo Kurama. The sensei of the team will be Anko Mitarashi. All of the teachers and future senseis nodded and left the room. Minato frowned and looked down upon Menma's page. He was curious about Menma. What were the chances an orphan would be named after a ramen ingredient like his daughter, Shio? And why did he feel a pang of guilt every time he looked at the face of Menma? What no one else knew is that behind the bars of a large cage in a sewer, a large fox chuckled to himself as he watched through Shio Uzumaki's eyes and waited to see the result of its interference. Konoha Academy, Menma's POV. Menma was seated alongside Yakumo and Lee as they waited for the teacher to announce the teams. Soon Iruka Yumino came into the room and took out a sheet of paper and started to list the teams. 1-8 unimportant. Team 9 will be Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma. Your sensei will be Mitarashi Anko. Menma smiled slightly as Yakumo and Lee cheered. Team 10 will be Neji Hyuga, Tenten, and Mito Gecko. Your sensei will be Hayate Gecko. Iruka set down his papers and smiled at all of the graduates. I have been very glad to be your sensei for these past few years. I hope everyone's dreams come true and that everyone's will of fire will never diminish. Iruka was about to continue before a canopy smashed through the window and attached two kunais to the blackboard. On the canopy read, the Single Mitarashi Anko, sensei of Team 9. At the bottom of the canopy stood Anko in a dramatic pose. Alright all you gakis, I want to see Team 9 up on the roof in 5 minutes. She poofed into smoke soon after the announcement, leaving the entire room stunned for a few seconds before Team 9 stood up and made their way up to the roof. Academy roof, Menma Pav. The trio arrived at the roof to see Anko munching on some dango as she grinned at them. Alright you three, name your names, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, that sort of thing. Yakumo looked at Anko's outfit a bit scandalized but spoke in a respectful tone. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first, sensei? Anko grinned again and swallowed the rest of the dango and started her introduction. I am the Mitarashi Anko. My likes are poisons, torture, blood, tea ceremonies, and my cute little gakis. My dislikes are a certain snake, bad dango, bad sake, and arrogant assholes. My hobbies are working at the T&I division and hanging out in the forest of death. My dream is to kill a certain snake. Now it's your turn, Gaki 1. Yakumo looked a little affronted by the nickname but continued anyway. My name is Yakumo Kurama. My likes are genjutsu, painting, and rice balls. I dislike my alternate personality Ito, and a certain person. My hobbies are painting and studying genjutsu. My dream for the future is to be the best genjutsu user in the elemental nations. Anko looked at Lee. Alright, and you big brows. Lee jumped excitedly and spoke quickly. Yosh. My name is Rock Lee. I like taijutsu, Guy Sensei, training, and curry. I do not have many things I hate, but I dislike natural-born prodigies. My hobbies are training and making curry, and my dream for the future is to surpass Guy Sensei as a taijutsu specialist. Anko nodded at that information and turned to Menma, and finally you Gas-kun. Naruto scowled slightly at the nickname but said calmly, "My name is Menma, no last name. My likes include poisons, gardening, ramen, and books. My dislikes include a certain family, people who look down on medic nin, and arrogant people. My hobbies are gardening, training, and studying different poisons and their effects. I do not have a dream for the future but more of an ambition. I plan on becoming the greatest medic nin and poison user in the elemental nations." Enko smiled widely at their introductions and gave them their first instructions. "Alright then, my cute little Gakis, tomorrow we will have the True Genin test at Training Field 9. Lee looked confused. "True Genin test, sensei?" Enko smirked at Lee. "Of course, you didn't think to become full-fledged Genin you just needed to just pass a written test and some basic jutsu, did you? Meet me at the field at 8 a.m. and if you're late it's straight back to the academy." With those words she shushined away in a whirlwind of leaves. Naruto looked at the jutsu and thought to himself, "I really have to learn that jutsu." Naruto looked at his potential teammates. "We should be well rested for tomorrow, so make sure you go to bed early and eat a good breakfast." Knowing Enko-sensei, this test will not be easy. Yakumo and Lee nodded and they walked off in different directions, each thinking and preparing for the test the next day. Training Ground 9 was traditional for the Genin Team 9 to practice in. It was a basic training field surrounded by dense forests and an open field in the center that featured as the training ground. It was nearing 6:40 in the morning when Yakumo, Lee, and Naruto arrived at the training ground. They had each come a bit early to plan for the True Genin test. Naruto started off the planning. "Alright, I have known Sensei for quite a while. She is an all-round fighter who uses primarily stealth attacks to kill or injure her opponents. She has the ability to summon snakes to aid her in battle. She is also one of the few poison specialists in the village besides myself." Both Yakumo and Lee nodded at the information and Yakumo commented, "I suggest with the information we have on Sensei is to use a distraction. Lee will distract Sensei while I layer illusions while Menma finishes her off." Menma nodded at the sound plan. It probably would not work against a Jonin like Enko, but it was the best they had. Lee raised his fist to the sky and shouted, "Yosh! With the power of youth there is no way we cannot pass this test." Yakumo and Menma sweat dropped. It was clear that he had already been corrupted from Guy. Suddenly he felt a chill as if someone was walking on his grave. He quickly knocked back his teammates and deflected the incoming kunai with a scalpel. Scowling a bit he sighed and spoke out loud to the woods, "Oi, Sensei, do you have to throw kunai every time we get together?" Enko shushined in front of the group, grinning widely. "Well Gaki, it's good to see you haven't lost your touch in the time we have been away from each other. If you had I would have to beat those skills back into you." Menma shivered a bit knowing she was being completely serious. "What is our test today, Sensei?" Enko grew serious and began to explain the test. "I was going to do a special test for you Gakis. However, it is tradition for the 2 rookies of the year and the dead last take the bell test." Enko took out 2 bells and attached them to her waist. "The purpose of this test is to take these bells from me. The person who does not have any part of a bell will return to the academy." All 3 students tensed. It went without saying that there were only 2 bells. Enko grinned evilly at them. "You have until noon, which is in 3 hours, you may begin." All 3 students jumped into the surrounding forest. Enko looked around the forest and smirked. She may not be a censor like Kakashi, but. A green garden snake was staring at Menma from behind. A black snake was staring at Yakumo. A blue snake stared at Lee from the bushes. They can't escape her snakes. Training Ground 9 surrounding forest, Menma Pav, 3 hours until test is over. He knew there has to be some sort of trick to this test. He had reviewed the previous team rosters from the Hokage's personal library. There had never been a 3-member team unless it was for a double apprenticeship, which rarely ever happens. He thought back to Anko's words, "any part of a bell," and he smirked. Clever Sensei, but not clever enough. He jumped through the forest searching for his teammates. Training Ground 9 open field, Lee Pav, 2.45 hours until test is over. I jumped into the field to confront our sensei. I would not fail Guy Sensei and will get a bell, or I will do 500 laps around Konoha on my hands. I arrived at the field and took my stance in front of Anko Sensei and smiled widely. Greetings Sensei, I will take one of those bells now. Anko's sweat dropped at his loud entrance. You're not very smart, are you Gaki? Not answering, Lee dashed at his sensei at high chunin speeds and jumped in the air in a spinning kick, leaf whirlwind. Anko easily dodged the kick and kicked Lee's side as he passed, breaking his spin and tossing him away. Lee jumped up and ran at Anko and was about to punch her when she was replaced by a log. Kawamari. He though as he looked around for his sensei. However, as soon as he turned around, the log poofed and was replaced by Anko, who kicked him in the back into the woods. She quietly chuckled to herself. She never thought that any idiot would confuse Kawamari for Henge. In another dimension, Naruto sneezed. She looked down at a snake in the grass and it whispered information to her. Her grin widened. She knew her favorite Gaki would understand the test. Now they just had to get a bell from her. Training Ground 9. Surrounding forest, Menma Pav, 2 hours till test is over. He had quickly found Yakumo hiding near his location and told her his theory about the test. She had believed him and they quickly went to find Lee. They found him getting his kicked by Anko Sensei. It was a good thing that she was going easy on him. Last time he made a stupid mistake like that, she had copied Kakashi's 100 Years of Pain with a kunai and explosive tags. They quickly gathered Lee and explained the situation to him. He was quick to agree that they needed to work together and they started to hash out a plan. Menma brought out 2 sealing tags and handed them to his teammates. We don't have time to make you too immune to my poisons, so wear those on your chest. They will filter out the air and prevent poison from entering your lungs. Yakumo took one of the tags and looked at Menma's gas mask. Why do you wear that if you have these tags, and when did you learn sealing? Menma didn't even look sheepish as he stated seriously, it looks more badass than wearing a sealing tag. Plus those tags do not last forever, these will last around 2 hours max. I learned some sealing from Anko Sensei, a lie, but they didn't need to know that. These anti-poison seals are mandatory for any poison user to carry. They both nodded and they started their plan. Training Ground 9. Open field, Anko's Pav, 1 hour until test is over. Anko was standing in the center of the field when 3 syringes flew from the surrounding forest. She quickly dodged them but noticed 3 explosive notes wrapped around them. Shit! She cursed as they exploded. As the smoke cleared, a broken log was on the ground. Menma rushed out into the field with his chakra scalpels activates and rushed at the now revealed Anko in a taijutsu match. He thrust a glowing palm at Anko as she dodged the thrust and retaliated with a high kick to the head. He ducked backwards beneath the kick and sprang up from the ground in a backwards cartwheel, kicking Anko in the chin in the process. As he landed on his feet, he jabbed at Anko's exposed throat with his scalpel. However, before he could get near her throat, she kneed him in the stomach, then kicked him away from her. She quickly spun around and backhanded Lee, who was about to punch her in the back. Soon she was countering a barrage of taijutsu from Lee and Menma. She smirked a bit and caught both Lee and Menma's fists and spun around, throwing them in opposite directions. Not bad Gakis, but you're 100 years too early to beat me in close combat. As Menma and Lee were falling, their pained grimaces turned into smirks as a small smoke bomb near Anko's feet exploded. The field suddenly got filled with purple smoke. Anko, who was in the middle of the blast, started coughing a bit and felt her limbs starting to become heavier. As she was coughing, that damn Gaki made a paralyzing poison that can affect me! Exclamation mark quote. She quickly went through hand signs and used a wind jutsu to push the poison away from her. As soon as she could see again, Menma was in front of her, a syringe on each finger covered in chakra scalpels. She took out a kunai and channeled chakra into it to deflect the jabs and slashes of Menma's needles. She had to duck as Lee proceeded to do another leaf whirlwind at her back and jumped out of the way as Menma slashed at her with his scalpels. Suddenly she felt a shift in the air as she fluxed her chakra and her 2 students disappeared and Lee's kick was about to contact to her face while Menma was nowhere to be seen. She bent down unnaturally to dodge Lee's kick and caught a small dart in her hand that was about to enter her neck from behind. Menma emerged from the woods again. His gas mask was on his face and a blowpipe sticking out of a section of the mouthpiece that was previously hidden behind his gas mask. Anko grinned at her two students. Not bad gakis, but not enough to take me down. Lee was about to charge her again when she pointed her arm at him and yelled, "Sanejishu," and snakes wrapped around Lee and she dragged him to crash him into Menma, who was charged at her from behind. She chuckled a bit before her eyes widened. Her perception had switched. It felt as if she was doing a handstand and looking up at the sky. She smirked a bit. What a nice genjutsu. She closed her eyes and with sound deflected and blocked the attacks from her two students as she continued to flux her chakra to get rid of the genjutsu. Suddenly she opened her eyes as she dispelled the genjutsu and dodged the attacks of her students before kicking them away from her. She smirked a bit as she saw them struggling to get up. What she was not prepared for was when Naruto suddenly shouted, "Now!" In the forest, Yakumo had just finished a painting of Anko, locked a bind of steel beams and injected chakra into the painting. In the middle of the field, Anko suddenly froze as she saw steel beams wrapped around her body. Both Menma and Lee rushed to the bells. Anko, unable to free herself from the real illusion, could not react as both bells were taken from her. She smirked as all three of her students stood in front of her, all smiling while Lee and Menma had the bells. She looked at all three of her students. "All right, you gakis, Lee and Menma have a bell, so it looks like Yakumo is going back to the academy." Menma smirked a bit and used his chakra scalpel to cut his bell in half and gave it to Yakumo. "You never said we could not split the bells, sensei. And besides, this test is not about getting the bells but working together." Anko started laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha. I can't wait to see Kakashi's face when he learns that my students passed his precious bell test." "You were right, Menma, the point of this test was teamwork. I am proud of all of you, my cute little students. But for now I need to report the results to the Hokage. Why don't you all treat yourself to something nice for lunch while I do that?" She poofed away in a shunshin. All three genin members grinned at each other. Lee was shouting about youth and how he made Guy-sensei proud. Yakumo was glowing with happiness that she proved her old sensei Kurenai wrong and became a genin. Menma smirked to himself as he took off his gas mask. He was now a genin 1 year before his sister. He could not wait to finally show his former parents what he could do by defeating his sister. Menma turned to his teammates and smiled a bit. "Why don't we go out for some sushi? If we all pitch in, we can get some of the good stuff." They all smiled to each other again and walked to his favorite sushi bar. Hokage meeting. Konoha, 1 hour after the successful genin test. All of the Jonin senseis that had already tested their students came into the room to discuss their results to their Hokage. Soon, when all of the senseis were gathered, they announced their results. Team 1. Failed. Team 2. Failed. Team 3. Failed. Team 4. Failed. Team 5. Failed. Team 6. Failed. Team 7. Inaku Yamanaka, Choju Akamichi, and Shiori Nara passed. Team 8. Pakura Abarame, Hibiki Izunaka, and Tojiro passed. Now it was Anko's turn. Team 9. Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma passed. Finally Hayato walked forward and said, "Team 10. Mito Gecko, Neji Hyuga, and Tenten passed." Minato nodded, smiling. 4 teams had passed this year, which is one more than the usual amount of students to graduate. He also noticed that Team 9 had passed. He knew that team had been given the bell test and he was curious to see how they did. "Thank you everyone for your hard work. I will be seeing the senseis of the past teams here tomorrow for your first D rank assignments. I would like Anko to stay behind for a few seconds, please." Everyone nodded and looked at Anko confused as they left the room. Minato picked out the files of Team 9 inches. "I wanted to hear your opinion of this team. It is rare that a bell test is passed. The bell test was notorious for having the highest number of failures. It was for this reason that it was reserved only for the team with the rookie and kunoichi of the year." Anko nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama, I believe that this team can be a very strong fighting force in the future. Lee and Menma were keeping me on my toes with their taijutsu and poisons while Yakumo kept me cornered with their genjutsu. If I was high chunin or even low jonin, I may have lost the battle, not just the bells. Minato looked a bit surprised. After all, it's rare to see a genin team have so much potential. He looked at the folders and couldn't help feeling pride for Menma, but he was not sure why. He looked back at Anko and smiled. Thank you, Anko-san. I will see you tomorrow to hand out your first D ranks. Anko smiled evilly and laughed. Can't wait to see the looks on the Gaki's faces then they first do D ranks. She continued to chuckle evilly out the building, scaring to death the people she passed through the building. Hokage's office. Konoha, one day after the Genin test, Menma Pav. Team 9 and their sensei were waiting for their first mission as a team. They were all excited for their first mission. They were standing in front of the Chunin who gave out D and C rank missions. The Chunin sorted through the D rank scrolls until he pulled out a mission. Team 9, the Daimo's wife's cat Tora has gone missing, it is your job to retrieve it. All of the Genins on Team 9, even Lee, deadpanned at the Chunin. Menma sighed, already expecting this from seeing all of the Genin teams do meaningless tasks around the village. After several hours of chasing the damn cat, they returned to the office, heavily battle-wounded by the smug-looking cat in Yakumo's arms. The Chunin chuckled a little bit after they completed the mission and took a look at the remaining scrolls. Well, the only missions we have left for the day are weeding Miss Haruka's garden, repainting an elder's house. Outside the room they could hear a commotion and a woman's voice yelling shrilly, "No! Tora!" The Chunin sighed, and catching Tora again. Team 9 sighed as one as they accepted another D rank. Training Field 9 Konoha, 1 month after Team 9's first D rank. It was an entire month of hell for Team 9. In the morning they would constantly train with Anko and then do boring D rank missions for the rest of the day. It was not until after their 40th D rank mission that Anko had them gather at Training Ground 9. Anko faced her team. Alright Gakis, tomorrow we are going on our first C rank mission. I want all of you to get a good night's sleep tonight and be well prepared for the mission. We will probably not be back for a week or two. The three Genins looked excited and nodded as they left to prepare for their first real mission. Menma arrived at his apartment that he had bought with his money from the D rank missions. He looked at the mirror for a bit before wiping the makeup off his cheeks, revealing 3 whisker-like marks. He did not know why he was gaining these marks. Only his sister had these marks and she was the Kyuubi container. However, until he figured out what was happening, he would keep these marks hidden. He sighed, only 2 more months until the Chunin exams. He knows he can't partake in the exams. He knows that Minato would never let his daughter not partake in the first Chunin exams after she graduates. He was in luck, the next Chunin exams was in Kumo. He could make an easy argument not to take the exams this time. He also figured out that Neji's team would not participate because of the history between the Hyugas and Kumo. He smiled grimly, it was just a matter of time before he faces against his sister. And at the end of it, he would be the one standing over her, and gaining his revenge by humiliating that man's daughter in front of the entire world. Inside Menma's mindscape had taken the form of a large pond surrounded by trees. In the center of the water 2 glowing red eyes appeared, slowly taking shape from the water. Finally a small fox with 1 tail emerged from the water and smirked. The chakra he had injected into the kid had finally managed to allow his consciousness in was finally large enough. Before he was sealed in the brat Shio, he had injected some of his chakra into the other kid, Naruto something. He had used that little chakra to place a genjutsu around anyone of his blood to ignore him. This allowed his plan to succeed. Without his consciousness in the seal, the Jubi could never be revived unless both his consciousness and chakra were in the Gedo Mazo statue. It was just an added bonus that he could gain his revenge against all the years chained to a giant moon in Kushina's mindscape. He looked at his small body in disdain. He would grow fast from the excess chakra in his new host's body. However, he would not be at full strength until Naruto reaches the age of 16. He slightly regretted making the kid's life so bad, but in order to defeat Madara, the deception was necessary. However, the kid had grown strong away from his parents, and with his chakra they could train to defeat Madara, while Shio will be the bait. He knew that Naruto would be a better host because only he knew that he was the reincarnation of Asura, not Shio. He chuckled and delved back into the pond, knowing that it wasn't time to reveal himself to Naruto, no Menma yet. Menma was sitting with Lee and Yakumo at their favorite sushi bar as they discussed their first C rank. Menma finished a fatty tuna sashimi before he spoke. The mission will most likely along the lines of escort or assassination. Enko already told us that's what our team was built towards. Yakumo gulped a bit. I can't believe we will really have to kill already. I know we have learned about it during the academy, but the actual knowledge that you're about to do it, it's scary. Lee nodded solemnly. Yes, it will be a harsh blow to our youthfulness, but it is required to become stronger as ninja. Menma chewed a bit more before looking around. I wonder why our sensei called us here. Our C rank isn't for another 4 hours. Enko arrived at their booth and sat down, stealing a salmon sashimi from Menma. Well, Gaki, we are here for a very important mission that could be critical to our survival in the future. All three genins gulped a bit as they heard that. Enko suddenly tied Lee up. We are getting rid of this spandex and getting you a real ninja outfit. All of the genins and some of the other diners at the restaurant sweat dropped. Lee suddenly started stuttering. BB, but Enko-sensei, Guy said that this outfit will increase my youthfulness and unlock my full potential. Enko started dragging Lee out of the restaurant, chuckling a little bit. The only thing that outfit will increase if your changes of death on an assassination mission. Menma and Yakumo quickly paid for their meal and ran after his sensei and unfortunate teammate. They found the master and unfortunate student at a popular clothing store for shinobi where Lee was still tied up crying crocodile tears as Enko picked out an outfit. Soon she picked out an outfit and Sparta kicked Lee into the room after untying him and gave him the outfit for him to wear. Soon he came out of the dressing room and everyone gaped at Lee. He was wearing a dark green tight latex sleeveless muscle shirt with black shinobi pants, combat boots, and arm guards with latex fingerless gloves underneath. Think Lancer's clothing from Fate Zero. Enko grinned smugly as her choice in outfit was definitely the right one. Enko grabbed Lee and rushed out of the store while yelling, now to the barber shop. Menma and Yakumo chased after the rapidly disappearing duo. Soon they arrived at the Konoha barber shop and entered to see Lee tied to one of the chairs and surrounded by evilly chuckling barbers. Menma deadpanned at his sensei, what is going on here? Enko grinned down at Menma, well, it seems that they have been wanting to destroy that horrid bowl cut and eyebrows of his ever since they saw him on the streets a few times. They said he was on their head-hunting board. She pointed to a wall where there were a bunch of photos of different men. On top of the wall said, targets. Some of the most predominantly displayed were Kakashi Hatake, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and Maida Guy. Underneath Guy there was a picture of Rock Lee crossed out with a red marker. After 30 minutes a new Lee was revealed. They had trimmed his eyebrows so his eyes did not look so wide anymore. His hairstyle was now wavy in places with one strand of hair going down his forehead, Lancer's hairstyle. Both Menma and Yakumo gaped at Lee. Where had the weirdo green beast go? Lee looked forlornly at his green spandex suit in his hands and looked at Enko. Sensei, are you sure this will allow me to become a better ninja and expand my youthfulness? Enko grinned at Lee. Sure kid, that outfit will definitely help you become a ninja. Suddenly Lee's face brightened and he shouted, yes sensei. I will become a strong ninja with this new look. If I don't I will do 1,000 laps around Konoha. Menma smirked a bit. There he is. Hokage's office. Konoha, Menma Pav. Team 9 were standing in front of the Hokage's desk. Minato sat behind the desk along with two Chunin helpers and was looking at a few scrolls in a box labeled C rank. However, before he could pull out a mission, Enko stepped forward. Hokage-sama, I would like to request a hunt. A hunt was a group of missions set aside to allow genin teams used to killing. These missions usually involved destroying bandit camps around the Land of Fire. Minato raised his eyebrows and looked over at the determined team. He saw no hesitation among the Genin's side. He always hated this part of being Hokage, forcing young kids to make their first kill. He looked at Team 9 inches. Alright then, your mission will be to destroy the bandit camp that was reported outside of the small town of Shishiong near the border of the Land of Earth. Do not worry about Iwa Shinobi, we have a peace agreement with them, so if you encounter any they are unlikely to engage. The mission should take around 2 weeks to complete. Team 9 nodded and excited the room to prepare for their first C rank. Menma's apartment, Konoha. Menma finished packing his supplies. He was bringing 2 changes of clothes, food in preservation seals, around 100 different vials of poison with labeled effects, his medical equipment, kunai, shuriken, senbon, darts, and some small arrows for his latest weapon. He rolled the sleeve of his trench coat a bit and looked at the device Anko had gifted him with. Flashback 2 weeks ago, Menma Pav. Menma was practicing a water ninjutsu exercise given to them by Anko sensei. She had tested their affinities and Lee had lightning, Yakumo had earth, and he had water. Anko had commented that despite not being able to do jutsu, Lee could still produce nature chakra and could eventually infuse his punches and kicks with lightning chakra similar to the Raikage. Anko had Yakumo practicing some defensive earth-style ninjutsu. She had informed him that his water attacks could be a good combination with his poisons. Many poisons can become more toxic when exposed to water or evaporate in the air when upon contact to it. She had him practicing the water gun shot technique, which was the opposite of the fireball jutsu, and water prison jutsu. Both were basic C-rank water ninjutsu but could be used very effectively with his poisons. However, before any of them could use the jutsu effectively, they needed to train in their elements. She gave Lee a leaf and told him when it was crumpled into a small ball he would be given the next step. Yakumo had to turn her leaf completely into ash while he had to extract all of the water from the leaf. He was around the midway point of extracting the water before the leaf crumpled, proof that he messed up again. He sighed and looked up as Anko walked up to them carrying 3 scrolls. Team 9 stopped their training exercise and approached Anko. Sensei gave 1 scroll to each of us and explained, well, Gaki's good news. You're wonderful and Sensei has decided to gift all of you with a weapon. For Lee, I asked Guy to give you one of their nunchucks. Lee's eyes widened. The Maeda family was famous for their nunchuck wielders. It was said that Maeda Bruce was able to go head to head with the second Hokage with nothing but a pair of his nunchucks. Lee unsealed the 2 nunchucks and spanned them around a bit before grinning widely. For Yakumo, this is a joint project between Menma and I. She unsealed a tanto and handed it to Yakumo. This dagger is imbued with a mix of several different poisons that will kill a grown man in around a minute with a scratch. And finally, for Menma, she unsealed a very odd crossbow. It was small and attached to a fingerless glove. The glove seemed to have a reloading device that would automatically reload the crossbow. Anko grinned a bit. This little beauty is an item I found a few years ago at a random shop in the Land of Snow. The bolts loaded into it are unpoisoned, but she handed him a quiver of small arrows. You can poison whatever you want on these, which you can load manually. Menma nodded and put on the contraption. He looked around and noticed a target a few meters away. He pointed the arm-mounted crossbow and fired rapidly at the target, each hitting in the inner circle. He gave a small smile and thanked his sensei. Thanks, sensei, this is great. Anko saw the small smile and smirked. It was hard to get that kid to smile. End flashback. At 1 p.m. all the members of Team 9 arrived at the gate and greeted each other. Soon their sensei arrived and they jumped into the forest at high speeds, each mentally preparing for what they're about to do. Forest surrounding Shishiong. 12 p.m. Northern Land of Fire, 3 days since Team 9 set out from Konoha, Menma Pav. Team 9 was hiding in the trees looking over the bandit camp. The camp was hidden in a clearing surrounded by trees north of Shishiong. They were discussing their plan to wipe out the bandits. Anko began to tell them the plan. Alright, I want Yakumo to maintain a genjutsu around the camp to prevent their escape and to remain undetected. Menma, spread your poison gas around the camp. Lee, when Yakumo and Menma complete their tasks, I want you to go in and start killing the guards. Then we will all enter at the 3 entrances to the camp to kill the rest of the bandits. Everyone nodded. Yakumo's POV. I got into position at the east entrance and quickly began to go through some hand seals and whispered, Temple of Nirvana. Soon all of the guards around the camp saw feathers in front of their eyes and fell asleep. Menma Pav. He crouched upon the largest tree at the southern entrance and manually inserted a syringe into his crossbow and fired them to critical spots around the bandit camp. Soon the camp was littered with syringes. Lee's POV. Lee arrived at the west entrance to the bandit camp and took out his nunchucks and breathed deeply before activating a seal on his tongue to filter out the air from the poison. Anko's POV. She stood silently away from the camp observing their progress and was impressed. These Gakis were doing pretty well on their first time. She frowned and looked a bit to the north. Her snakes had picked up a large man approaching the camp they were about to attack and she was worried. Menma's POV. Menma frummed a handseal and whispered, Katsu. And all of the syringes he launched into the camp exploded with a noxious purple gas throughout the camp. He quickly put on his gas mask before running into the camp to help Lee, who was already battling some of the coughing bandits. He rolled under a wild swing by a bandit and shot him with a crossbow bolt before peppering the bandits around Lee with arrows. Not to waste arrows, he quickly activated his chakra scalpels and started to kill more bandits. Lee's POV. Spinning his nunchucks around at startling speeds, he broke bones and necks of bandits around him as he entered the camp like a whirlwind, striking at any bandit he could see and avoiding any of the wild strikes of the bandits coughing from the poison in the air. Yakumo POV. Grabbing the tanto from the sheath on her left shoulder, she quickly entered the camp, cutting any bandit that got too close to her as she started to seal any supplies and stolen goods the bandits had. She would return all of the stolen items to the village after this was over. Menma Pav. Soon no bandits remained and bodies were littered around the camp. He closed his eyes a bit as he heard Lee and Yakumo throw up in the forest after their first skills. He knew he should feel worse about killing for the first time. But a part of his humanity died a long time ago when he first picked up Orochimaru's journal. He wished he felt worse about killing the bandits. But all he felt inside was a hollowness that he couldn't describe. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he flinched before opening his eyes and saw Anko with a hand on his shoulder. You okay, Menma? In the back of his mind he realized this was the first time she had called him by his name instead of brat or Gaki. He nodded slowly. I will be fine, it will just take a bit to get used to. Anko nodded, understanding. However, before they could leave back to Konoha, Anko suddenly grabbed a Sensushin out of the way as one of the largest men that he had ever seen slammed a huge mace on the ground, cracking it heavily and kicking up a bunch of dust. When the dust settled, the man was revealed to Team 9. He was a giant of a man at 7 feet tall and was heavily muscled. He had scraggly dark brown hair and a large beard. He carried a large two-handed mace with an anvil-sized head. On his forehead was the symbol of Iwa with a slash crossing it. He chuckled deeply at their ready stances. So 4 tree huggers think they can beat me? Anko narrowed her eyes. Rogan the Butcher, a rank missing nin known for slaughtering entire towns in the Land of Fire during the last war. Went rogue a couple of years ago since Tsuchikage signed the peace treaty. What are you doing in this area? Behind her back she made a few hand signs to her team. Rogan grinned darkly. I was just about to have fun in the town nearby. I heard there was a bunch of scum living there and I wanted to clean it up. But here I am with a bunch of newborn genin ninjas and a whore Konoha kunoichi. This will be fun. With those words he lifted his mace and quickly swung it at me. I jumped away from the mace, firing bolts from my crossbow at high speed, but most of the arrows were deflected as he spun his mace around. We all charged at Rogan, but he simply grinned again and started spinning around with his mace, forcing us all to get back before we were clubbed. He stopped spinning suddenly and kicked Yakumo away from him into the woods harshly. Lee yelled, Yakumo. Before having to dodge a fast swing by Rogan but ended up getting back-handed by him straight into a tree and was knocked out. I quickly went through some hand seals and used one of the few ninjutsu he learned from Orochimaru's notes. He cupped his hands together and converted some of his chakra into poison, and a small black ball appeared between his hands and he shouted, "Dokujin no Jutsu." And a large blast of black smoke appeared from his hands straight at the butcher. Rogan saw the cloud and quickly went through some hand seals and clapped his hands together. A wall of earth separated him from the poison cloud. As the cloud hit the wall started to dissolve. Rogan quickly charged at Menma with his anvil. Menma activated his chakra scalpels and Anko drew two longer than normal kunai and they engaged him in taijutsu. They were locked in combat for around 2 minutes before Rogan slammed the handle of his mace into Anko's stomach before knocking her out with another hit from his mace. Seeing his sensei fall made something snap inside of Menma. He unsealed a syringe from a seal on his wrist and injected it into his arm. Rogan was confused as Menma injected something into himself. Time seemed to slow and all Menma could hear was a heartbeat steadily speeding up. He started frothing at the mouth a bit and his eyes turned pure white. Rogan looked a bit alarmed at this development and charged at Menma, preparing to strike him down before he finished whatever he was doing. However, as he struck the genin, his mace hit blackened skin and his mace was stopped dead. Soon this darkness was spreading all across Menma until he was completely covered except his eyes, and a jagged smile played across the thing's mouth. The poison that he injected himself with was one of Orochimaru's more brilliant creations. He took the venom of the chakra eater, a special type of mosquito that injects its poison into its victim that absorbs its chakra. He took a syringe full of it and injected it with the chakra of several bestial creatures from the forest of death. He also mixed it with the venom of the fossilized snake, a snake that hardens the chakra system with its venom when it bites an opponent. When injected into a human, the results are what is displayed. The venom causes chakra to harden in the chakra pathways and allows the human body to become invulnerable and have the senses and fighting instinct of a predator. In exchange, one has no control over their body until the effect wears off. Rogan was hard-pressed to do anything against the bestialized Menma as he constantly guarded the clawed attacks of Menma. Soon several cuts and scrapes dotted the butcher. Menma fought like a beast, constantly scratching, cutting, and biting at Rogan until eventually the man's mace missed and he cut the missing nin's throat open. Rogan spluttered a bit and died looking at the roaring in victory face of his killer. Soon the effects of the enhancer wore off and Menma fell to the ground, exhausted. He looked at his skin and noticed it was not purple. He had read that a side effect of the enhancer was that the last test subject, some guy called Mundo, was purple for a month after the poison was injected into him. He looked at his sensei and crawled to her and his hand started to glow green. He healed her to the best of his ability, then passed out from chakra exhaustion. Inside Menma's mindscape, Kyuubi looked through Menma's eyes. He fought Rogan. He was impressed despite himself as he saw the boy fight a Jonin. As a reward for the kid, he decided to use a little of his corrosive chakra to prevent any negative side effects of the stuff he injected himself with. He looked around the pond a bit and looked at an hourglass on the shore of the lake. His illusion over the Namikaze family would not last for much longer than a year. He sighed a bit and prepared to meet his new container at the end of the year. He hoped the kid would forgive him for his deception. Was a bright morning when Menma slowly opened his eyes. He winced at the bright light hitting his eyes from the window as he sat up in bed, warily looking around him. He was in a modest but comfortable hotel room. Soon after he woke up, Anko entered the room with a tray of breakfast. He saw the food and his stomach growled. He realized he was very hungry. Anko sat down near him and he asked through eating his eggs, "What happened? Are Yakumo and Lee all right?" Anko nodded. Yes, Yakumo was lucky. She fell into some mud and it cushioned her fall a bit. As for Lee, he woke up a few hours before you did. Seeing how he is currently running around the village, he appears to be fine. I woke up around 30 minutes of being unconscious. You shouldn't use your chakra so recklessly to heal me, brat. You were suffering from severe chakra exhaustion. I'm surprised you're up already. But Anko suddenly turns deadly serious, making Menma gulp a bit. What the hell was that poison you took? I found the needle sticking out of your arm and found Rogan looking as if an animal attacked him. Menma looked away from Anko. It was a steroid that I created. Anko looked a bit angry. Bullshit. I know what we have worked on together, and that steroid was way too advanced for a rookie genin to completely demolish one of the highest ranked A-rank missing nin in the bingo book. The only reason that man was not S rank is because he is only wanted in Konoha and Iwa. A little known fact about becoming S rank in the bingo book is that you need to be wanted at A rank by 3 different ninja villages. Menma sighed a bit, contemplating what to do. He knew this may make her hate him, but he owed her the truth. He unzipped his trench coat and pulled down his shirt to show a seal on his heart, an unsealed Orochimaru's journal. He handed it to Anko. Anko took the journal and started flipping through it, getting angrier as she continued to read the experiments that her former mentor conducted. She looked up, more angry than he had ever seen her. What the hell, Gaki? Where did you find this? This is one of S personal journals. Menma winced a bit at her tone. When I was locked out of the Namikaze estate, I found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories near a training ground I used. I had just decided to get revenge on my former family, but I had no one to train me. I had no resources, no mentor, and no allies, so I decided to learn from his journals. Anko's angry expression softened a bit. Menma, you can't just live your life for revenge. I have seen people, including my former mentor, walk that path. All of them either ended up dead or a worse monster than the person they wished revenge on. Anko hugged Menma as a mother would. Menma. No, Naruto, you do not need to become a monster like my former sensei. A good friend of mine once told me that in order to become truly strong, you need something precious to fight for. Revenge isn't something precious to you. It is just an empty emotion of hatred that will continue to corrupt you. When your revenge is complete, you're left with nothing but more hatred. Mentally, she was thanking the third Hokage for telling her this after she was abandoned by Orochimaru, or she would have no clue what to say to this kid. For the first time since he was 5, Naruto felt tears running down his face as he was hugged for the first time in his memory. He thought back to all the times he was forgotten by his family and how they doted on Shio. He still felt the burning hatred for his former family. But he then thought of Lee, Yakumo, and Anko, and he felt happy for the first time in a long time. He smiled, a true warm smile. He would be the best of both worlds. He would prove to his former family that he was better than Shio, but he would not do it Orochimaru's way. He would become powerful and protect his precious people. He wrapped his arms around Anko and said softly, "Thank you, Ka-san." Anko smiled a bit. "No problem, brat." Exit of Shishiong, Land of Fire, Menma's POV. Team 9 was preparing to leave Shishiong when 4 Iwa shinobi jumped down in front of them. Team 9 quickly got into fighting stances, but the leader raised his hand. "Hold, we are not here to fight." Anko didn't loosen her guard and spoke, "What are you doing here then?" The leader of the Iwa group stepped forward a bit. He was a tall man with a rather large nose. He was dressed in the formal Iwa Junin outfit. He stopped a good distance from their group. "My name is Kitsuchi, Jonin of Iwagakure with my genin team, Kuratsuchi, Akatsuchi, and Suzumaki Kamizuro. We had heard that Rogan the Butcher was in the area and came to take him out, but it seems that we were too late." Anko nodded and relaxed a bit. "Yes, my genin team and I defeated Rogan." Kitsuchi looked a little impressed as he observed the 3 genin. "Yes, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Iwa for his death. However, we would like to request that you return the hammer of the first Tsuchikage to us. Rogan had stolen it before he went rogue." Anko looked surprised. "The hammer of the first Tsuchikage? The diamond helm? We did not know that he was carrying such a renowned weapon. I would have thought he would have used some of its abilities." Kitsuchi nodded. "The hammer has seals to prevent the unworthy of using it. You may keep the body of Rogan. He is rightfully yours to cash in the bounty." Anko took out the scroll they had sealed the hammer in and handed it to Kitsuchi. The Iowa Jonin unsealed the mace and inspected it a bit before nodding and sealing it back into the scroll. He looked at the group. The Tsuchikage will hear of this. It will definitely help ease some of the tensions after the peace treaty to hear that a Konoha team returned one of our greatest relics of the first Tsuchikage. Anko nodded. The Iowa team departed, but Menma noticed the girl Kuretsuchi look at him speculatively before jumping away with the rest of her team. Anko sighed in relief. That was Kitsuchi, the Great Earth Shaker. He is an S-class ninja of Iowa and slated to become the next Tsuchikage. During the last war he was famous for remodeling an entire forest into an earthen terrain for his allies. We were lucky they weren't hostile or we would have stood no chance. The genins shivered, for their usually unflappable sensei to be wary spoke volumes of that man's skill. Menma looked at the sun, which was approaching noon. Well, we need to report this to the Hokage, so let's head back as quickly as possible. Everyone nodded and they jumped into the forest, heading at full speed back to Konoha. Hokage's office. Konoha, 3 days after the events at Shishiong, Minato's POV. Minato deadpanned at the report in his hands. How did a C rank turn into an encounter with a high A rank missing nin and then an encounter with the S-class Iowa Jonin Kitsuchi? He sighed. Well, I am glad that no one was injured during this mission. I am also proud that you 3 defeated Rogan the Butcher. The bounty on his head will be split among the 4 of you. He smiled a bit. I also want to thank you for returning that weapon back to Iowa. I have already been sent a message from the Tsuchikage with a thank you and the information that he is sending a genin team to the next Chunin exams in Konoha. This is the first time Iowa has participated in a Chunin exam sponsored by the village since the system was made. Anko grinned. All in a day's work, Hokage-sama. He deadpanned at the Jonin sensei. I hope it isn't a daily thing. You were very lucky this time. However, due to the unforeseen variables in this mission, I bumped it up to A rank and you will earn the appropriate pay alongside the bounty of Rogan. Congratulations. Yukumo and Lee cheered while Menma smirked. The pay of an A- rank mission would cover his living expenses for the next year. Konoha streets, 6 months later, Menma's POV. The information that a genin team had killed the infamous Rogan the Butcher spread like wildfire throughout the village. Rogan was one of the most hated Iowa shinobi from the last war. To hear that a genin team managed to kill him made them pretty well known throughout the village. Soon they got into the habit of training with Anko, doing some D ranks and the occasional C rank. However, none of their C ranks were as exciting as their first one. They had skipped the Chunin exams in Kumo along with Team 10. They heard that Team 7 and 8 disbanded due to 2 deaths and some promotions, leaving the spots open for this year's graduating class. Currently he was spying on this year's graduating class. He wanted to scout out the competition and potential allies of the next generation. He also wanted to see the progress of his former sister. He noticed a few potential threats in the class. Uchiha Sasuke was the shinobi of the year at the moment, while his sister, Uzumaki Namikaze Shio, was the rookie and kunoichi of the year. The dead last of their generation was an Inazaka member named Kiba, the younger brother to the clan heiress. Today for their class it seemed as if they were demonstrating ninjutsu. Sasuke did a fireball jutsu, as expected of an Uchiha member. It was their calling card after all. Kiba did his clan jutsu Fang over Fang. Most of the academy students did simple henges or bushin no jutsus. When it was finally Shio's turn, she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb and yelled, Kuchio's no jutsu. And she appeared standing on a large frog. He froze, staring at the sight of the frog. He had known that Shio would eventually summon frogs. But he had figured that she would not be given the contract until she was Chunin at least. He frowned angrily. He could not beat his sister if she had an entire clan of toads to back her up. Minato had held down the Kyuubi with the boss summon of the Toad clan. He would stand no chance. He dashed to his hidden training grounds thinking deeply. He needed a summoning contract, that was for sure. However, the only contracts that he knew of in Konoha were the Nara clan's deer summoning contract, the Akamichi's butterfly contract, the tortoise contract of the Maida clan, and the toad contract belonging to his former family in Jiraiya of the Sannin. He frowned again. Trying to summon without a contract is incredibly dangerous. However, if one managed to gain a summoning contract through this method, they're bound to get stronger. Many famous shinobi who had passed the test of their most naturally aligned clans became extremely famous ninjas. The best examples of this would be the three Sannin, each now S-ranked ninjas. He knew he would not stand a chance against the Toad clan, even if he was more powerful than their summoner. Feeling a steely resolve settle over him, he left to find his sensei. Anko's apartment. Knocking on the door, Menma waited for Anko. His sensei opened the door and looked at him annoyed. "What do you want, Gaki? There is no training for this week." He nodded. "I know, sensei, I just wanted to inform you I am going to do some solo survival training in the Forest of Death for the next week and I will not be in contact." Anko nodded. "Be careful, Gaki. The tigers are a bit frisky since it's close to mating season." Menma nodded before running to the forest. When he was far enough in, he breathed in a bit to calm himself. Summoning without a contract is not illegal, but he would be the first unsponsored orphan to attempt this. All of the past people to summon animals without a contract either had special training from a clan or a high-ranking jonin. He went through the hand seals he had memorized from Shio and bit his thumb before saying quietly, "Kuchio's no jutsu." With that, he disappeared in a plume of smoke. Unkown Forest, Menma Pav. Menma crouched down on the ground as he arrived, looking around the area cautiously. The area he had landed on seemed to be pretty similar to the Forest of Death. He assumed he had summoned himself into a land creature's domain, so that removed sea creatures or any type of bird. The area also did not look like a swamp, so that removed reptiles. He looked around a bit more, expecting to see some overly large animal appear from the forest, but he could see nothing. What he did not know is that he is being watched at the moment. All around the forest, tiny eyes peered at him as they considered the latest potential summoner. They had not had a potential contract holder for centuries. Menma continued to walk down the only path in the forest. He still did not see any potential summoning animal. He saw several insects, small animals, but none that seemed to be summonable. He pulled his larger crossbow from his back. He had bought this weapon from the latest shipment of weapons from the land of snow. The weapon ran on chakra and could reload arrows extremely quickly. He had made the weapon even more deadly by poisoning all of the arrows. Eventually, he reached a clearing with an extremely large spider web. The web was constructed to look like a small city and was crawling with hundreds upon hundreds of spiders in different sizes. Some were as large as trucks while others the size of his fingernail. He put on his gas mask and cautiously approached the nest, wary of any potential attack. As he passed, many of the spiders turned to look at him curiously, or at least he thought it was curiously. It was hard to tell their emotions. Soon he arrived the center of the nest where a large throne was erected. He was confused. Why would a throne be here that was meant for a humanoid person? Before he could walk further, hundreds of spiders converged on the throne, seemingly merging into a human. Soon the blob of spiders gained color and the person was revealed. She was a tall woman with flowing black hair, eyes that instead of a pupil had a classic spider web pattern. She wore a black dress with spider web pattern straps, Arachne, Soul Eater. The lady smiled motherly at Menma and put a black fan in front of her mouth as she spoke. "It has been so long since a human has entered this realm. We have been waiting so long for a true summoner of our race." He stared at the being in front of him. "Who are you? I doubt you are human if you are here." The women didn't seem offended. "No, I am not. My name is Arachne, the collective consciousness of all the spiders of this realm." He felt his eyes widened. "So you are the hive mind of all of these spiders?" Arish nodded. "Yes, only a few of the spiders here have true awareness like other summoning creatures. However, an advantage of this is that I can control any spider, not only of this realm. For example, I know that your family abandoned you. I know where each member of your family is. I even know that your mentor, Anko, burned her dinner last night and was forced to eat out. He gaped at such an information-gathering ability. If what she was saying is true, she had the power to see through the eyes of every spider on Earth. That would outstrip any sensing ability he had ever heard of from anyone. He gulped a bit before becoming serious. What is your challenge to becoming a summoner of the Spider Clan? The woman tapped her chin in thought. The Spider Clan had never had a test for their summoner because no one had ever wanted her contract. She looked at the young man before her. She knew everything about him that she saw through her spiders. She knew he was a driven young man that would become very powerful in the future. She licked her lips a bit and spoke. I know almost your entire life, Menma, or should I say Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I know how powerful you can be in the future. Your fighting style is very similar to ours as well. I will give you the summoning contract. I wanted to gape at how easy that was, but I retained control over my emotions this time. I thank you, Queen Arish. Could you please explain the abilities of your contract? Arish nodded. The spider contract is not one of the most powerful contracts in terms of open combat, but in terms of subversion, intelligence gathering, and assassination we are unparalleled. We are able to locate and listen to any conversation where a spider can access. Finally, we can teach you our brand of senjutsu. I couldn't help but widen my eyes at the last bit of information. Senjutsu was only from the most rare of contracts. Each clan had their own brand of senjutsu. From what he read from Minato's notes is that the Toad clan boosts one's abilities by a factor of 10. He looked at Arish seriously. What is the purpose of your senjutsu? Arish smiled her motherly smile and explained. Our last summoner, Elise, was able to turn into a rather impressively large black widow spider. She gained the ability to access the collective consciousness of the spiders like I am able to. Finally, she gained the ability to use acid-based attacks. I believe she called it acid release. He thought of the possibilities of those powers. By being able to turn into a large spider would be extremely useful in combat. By entering the consciousness of every spider, his sensory ability would be unparalleled. However, the acid release drew his attention the most. That ability would go perfectly with his fighting style. He looked at Arachne. How does one learn your style of senjutsu? Arish frowned a bit. Other clans require you to absorb the errant nature chakra in the air. We use a special type of toxin to give you our abilities. However, this toxin is extremely deadly and requires thorough training in resisting poisons. He smirked a bit at that. I have trained myself for 6 years in resisting poisons. I will be able to handle it. Arish smirked a bit. What a convenient summoner. Elise required years of poison resistance training before she was able to undergo the Vilma toxin. She took out an ancient-looking vial from a spider and approached Menma. She cut herself with a knife and black blood flowed into a wooden goblet, filling it halfway. She then poured the crystal-clear concoction from the vial into the cup, filling it to nearly the brim. She handed the cup to Menma and spoke seriously. This will hurt you more than anything that has happened in your life. It will feel as if every cell in your body is melting and every nerve cell will hurt horribly. We will wrap you in one of our healing cocoons until the process is complete. The Vilma toxin will take 3 days to fully integrate with your body. After that, if you live, it will take around a week for you to heal. Menma nodded and mentally prepared himself as he drank deeply from the goblet. As soon as he finished the drink, spiders immediately started wrapping him in a cocoon. He barely acknowledged the spider silk around him as he felt an enormous amount of pain spreading through his body. The pain was worse than the time he overdosed on black widow venom to immunize himself. As he started to pass out, he thought of his friends, Lee's encouraging thumbs up and a sunny smile. Yukumo's soft smile, hands clasped behind her back as she encouraged him on. Enko's smirk as she told him to survive or she would find a way to make his afterlife hell. He smiled a bit in the cocoon. The pain seemed to dull a bit as he continued to think of his friends' encouragements. His precious people were waiting for him to return.